8 movies, 3 different Peter Parkers, countless iconic moments, and yet something's always left missing. We've seen Spider-Man save New York countless times. We've watched him fight aliens, team up with the Avengers, and even travel through the multiverse. But Peter Parker, the real Peter Parker, he's always been stuck somewhere between spectacular set pieces and rushed character development. And the truth is, a lot of the time when they try to tell Peter Parker's story, something gets left on the cutting room floor. That's something that doesn't quite make the final cut. The quiet moments, the struggles, the real heart of who Spider-Man is. And maybe that's because we've been looking at this all wrong. What Hollywood has been getting all wrong. Not because they don't want to, but because they're trying to show it in the wrong format. What if I told you the perfect Spider-Man story isn't a movie at all? If the best way to tell Peter Parker's story is through a different lens, then what better way is there than through the lens of prestige television? Think about it. When was the last time you watched a great movie and thought, wow, this would be so much better as a TV show? That is literally my thoughts after almost every Spider-Man movie. And this format would finally let us explore all those moments that the movies have to cut. The quiet nights when Peter patches himself up after a fight. The strain his double life puts on every relationship that he has. The small victories and crushing defeats that don't involve supervillains. We could see all of that. We could see him even struggling with homework after staying out all night because he was stopping crimes. We could watch him try to balance out a part-time job with his hero work, and it's so hard. And even seeing Peter experience those crushing moments of guilt when he has to let the people closest to him down because he has other people to save. Now look at what HBO did with The Last of Us, a video game adaptation that everyone said needed to be a movie. Instead, they gave it room to breathe as a series, and it became one of the most acclaimed shows of 2023. And we're living in an era where streaming services aren't just matching movie budgets, they're almost exceeding them. House of the Dragon, $20 million per episode. Lord of the Rings, The Rings of Power, nearly $60 million per episode. That's more than what Spider-Man 2 cost to make in 2004. And this also isn't just about throwing money at CGI, as modern TV shows are delivering cinema quality practical effects, stunts, and set pieces. Just look at what The Mandalorian achieved with practical effects alone. And what I love is how these shows aren't just matching movies in spectacle, but they're surpassing them in storytelling as well. When the boys need to spend an entire episode exploring a character's trauma, it can. When Better Call Saul wants to spend 10 minutes in silence watching someone plan a con, it does. Remember what Marvel and Netflix did with Daredevil? The show that proved you could have brutal, beautifully choreographed action one episode and a deep dive into Matt Murdock's Catholic guilt the next? No rushing, no cramming anything in, just storytelling at its own pace. And you know what? We've already seen proof that giving Spider-Man's story more room to breathe works. Just look at what Insomniac achieved with their PlayStation games. By not being confined to a 2-hour runtime, they created what many consider to be the definitive Spider-Man experience. In these games, we got to explore Peter's apartment, see his struggle with unpaid rent, and watch him deal with relationships of his falling apart. We experienced the weight of his choices when he had to choose between saving civilians or chasing down a villain. The games didn't just give us amazing web swinging and combat, they gave us time. Time to see Peter mentor Miles. Time to feel the strain between Peter and MJ. Time to watch Otto Octavius tragically go from Peter's mentor to the villain we all knew him to be. All of this is because they weren't rushing to wrap everything up before the credits rolled. Now imagine giving Spider-Man that same treatment. Those web-swinging sequences we love, we'd still have them, but we'd also have time for the smaller moments. The late-night study sessions after patrol. The quiet conversations with MJ or Gwen that don't get interrupted by a supervillain attack. The strain on Aunt May's face as she looks at unpaid bills. Every time Peter leaves his part-time job to stop a crime, that's money he's not making. Every torn costume is an expense that he can't afford. And every hour spent patrolling is an hour he's not studying, not working, not building the future he and Aunt May desperately need. TV isn't just catching up to movies anymore. It's revolutionizing how we tell stories. Streaming services have created a space where creators can take risks, where budgets can match the ambition, and where characters can develop naturally. Maybe it's time to stop trying to cram Peter Parker's rich world into 2-hour chunks. Maybe it's time to reimagine how we bring Spider-Man to life. This is why Spider-Man needs the TV show treatment. But it's not just about the format, it's about the approach. We're living in a golden age of young adult television that doesn't talk down to its audience. Shows that aren't afraid to show the messy reality of growing up. And here's something we need to talk about. Spider-Man doesn't need to be for everyone. Every adaptation so far has tried to hit every demographic, to be everything to everyone. And you know what? Maybe that's part of the problem. Now, I'm not saying we need Spider-Man acting inappropriately with jokes and references like Deadpool and Wolverine. That's missing the point entirely. But what if we told Spider-Man's story the way young people like you and myself actually experience in life? Not by making it edgy or inappropriate, but by making it real. You know what made Marvel Comics revolutionary with Spider-Man in the first place? It wasn't following some sanitized comic code. It was showing flawed and real people dealing with real problems. That's what connected with readers then, and that's what we're missing now. Imagine a Spider-Man show where his classmates feel like actual teenagers, where some of them drink, some of them experiment, some of them make terrible decisions, like we do. And then there's Peter, watching from the outside. Not because he's some perfect straight edge hero, but because he literally can't risk it. Because every time Harry offers a drink to him at a party, that voice in his head asks, what if someone needs Spider-Man tonight? Think about what that does to a person. The constant anxiety, the FOMO, the jealousy of watching everyone else get to be normal while you're carrying the weight of the city on your shoulders. Imagine exploring that jealousy, that deep human desire to just be normal for once, to make the kinds of mistakes everyone else gets to make, to learn and grow like a regular person. This isn't about making Spider-Man dark or edgy at all, but it's about finally acknowledging the real emotional toll of being Peter Parker, the way his powers isolate him, the way his responsibility shapes every relationship he has. And I would love to see what being a superhero does to a teenager's mind, to carry that much responsibility, to constantly make life or death decisions, to lie to everyone you love. I can't express how much I'd love this to be explored and actually see the toll being Spider-Man takes. The panic attacks after a near-death experience, the crushing guilt when you can't save everyone, the isolation of not being able to talk to anyone about what you're going through, to show that even heroes struggle. Heroes need help sometimes too. Because here's the thing, young people today are dealing with so much pressure and responsibility. They're inheriting a world of problems that get more complex by the day. Impossible choices and constant anxiety about the future. Sound familiar? That's Peter Parker's whole story. Maybe it's time we told it in a way that really resonates with how young people actually live and feel today. And that's exactly why these consequences matter so much right now. Because when we talk about the weight of being Spider-Man, we're not just telling superhero stories anymore. We're telling the story of what it means to be young in 2024. Think about what we just discussed. Peter dealing with the aftermath of every choice, living with the impact of his actions, trying to balance the spectacular with the everyday life. Sound familiar? Because young people today are living that same reality, just without superpowers. They're carrying weights that would make even Spider-Man stumble. And that's exactly what makes this format so perfect for today. It's not just about physical pain, we're talking about something deeper. Because while Peter's dealing with those bruised ribs and that guilt about the smashed window from his favorite pizza place, he's also carrying something every young person today understands: the crushing weight of responsibility in an increasingly complex world. The heart of Peter Parker's struggle has always been about responsibility, the weight of knowing you could help, knowing you should help, but also knowing the cost of that help. And this brings us to the most important point, and that is when you strip away the powers and the costume, Peter Parker's story has always been about one thing: trying to do the right thing in an increasingly complicated world. He has the power to help, but he's constantly underestimated, constantly told he should leave it to the adults. And yet, he keeps trying anyways. And that leads to what real heroism looks like today. Being a hero, being an icon is more than about stopping bank robbers anymore. Because what does Spider-Man do when he sees police brutality, when he witnesses discrimination, or when he sees someone in need because they just need a place to sleep or meal to eat for tonight? There are so many complex moral challenges that people are trying to navigate through every day of the week. Sometimes being a hero means standing up for what's right, even when it costs you something. And I don't mean to make Spider-Man political, but part of showing the kind of hero that he is about showing how those core themes of power and responsibility translate to today's world. Because that's what made Spider-Man revolutionary in the first place. He wasn't just a hero fighting bad guys. He was a reflection of his time, dealing with real issues that readers could relate to. Maybe it's time we let him be that again. Not by changing who he is, but by letting him face the same challenges, the same complexities, the same impossible choices that people face today. Because ultimately, that's what makes Spider-Man timeless. Not the powers, not the costume, but because the core story of a young person trying to do the right thing in a world that doesn't make that easy. And right now, that story matters more than ever. So how do you actually make all of this work? How do we take these themes, these character arcs, these action sequences, and turn them into something cohesive? And this is where the beauty of seasonal television really shines. To start this show off, it wouldn't be in the way you're thinking. We don't open with the spider bite. That happens at the end of episode 3. Those first few episodes, though, they're about establishing Peter Parker's world before it all changes. We meet his friends, understand his struggles, see his relationship with Aunt May and Uncle Ben. We learn what kind of person Peter Parker is before he gets his powers. So when that spider finally bites, we feel the weight of how it changes everything. The first few episodes establish Peter's world at Midtown High. We meet his academic rival turned friend Gwen Stacy, as well as his overworked but passionate science teacher, Mr. Max Dillon, who sees the potential in both Peter and Gwen. Max becomes something of a mentor to Peter, showing him that science isn't just about textbooks, it's about making the world better. And we'll see the cracks in Max's life too, along with more information about his past. His ideas getting stolen by Oscorp, patents rejected, and although he enjoys his job, he is working a job he is highly overqualified for. He desperately wants to get back to work in a real environment to do his research instead of the school science lab, but he still has bills to pay. Through these relationships, we understand the social and financial challenges Peter faces as a student who's brilliant, but also invisible to the other students, besides Flash Thompson, who chooses to pick on him. When Peter eventually gains his powers, the show goes into the emotional and psychological toll of his new abilities. And that's when we also can show Max Dillon in the process of trying to develop a revolutionary bioelectric battery that could provide cheap, clean energy to those in need of it. It seems like his big break. Instead, it's stolen by Oscorp, the lab where Peter was bitten. And on top of that, Max gets caught performing his own personal experiment on school property for this experiment and loses his job for unauthorized use of school resources. Because of all this, Max makes the decision to start his own campaign in support of his idea of electrical justice, shutting down power to wealthy neighborhoods who abuse this privilege while redirecting it to hospitals and schools that can't afford their energy bills. And while not working in a safe environment with his technology, the experimentation goes wrong, leading to the accidental use of his own technology on himself, turning him into Electro. For Peter, instead of immediately embracing the mantle of Spider-Man, once Peter gets his powers, Peter struggles to control his impulses, using his powers selfishly to solve his own problems, which ultimately leads to tragic consequences, resulting in the death of his beloved Uncle Ben. By the time we reach this point, it's not just tragic because we love Ben, it's tragic because we've spent time watching Peter make the exact kind of mistake that leads to this moment. And what I want the message to be about out for this part of the season is to be about Peter starting to learn the cost of his choices. Each episode since he was bit, we've seen Peter being put in situations where his new powers could solve his old problems. Peter can do everything he wants. He could put the bullying done to him by Flash Thompson to an end. He could win the money he needs to impress the people at school, for him to impress the girl he likes, but each time he uses his power selfishly, it backfires in ways that hurt people who he cares about. Not because the universe is punishing him, but because that's not how life works. Grief-stricken, Peter spirals, obsessively hunting criminals as Spider-Man while neglecting his personal life. Every night, Peter is throwing himself into being Spider-Man. He's staying out all night, hunting down every criminal he can find. He's not doing it specifically to help people. He's hunting down criminals out of rage and guilt, trying to punish every criminal because he couldn't stop the one that mattered to him. Only Gwen sees past Peter's pain, becoming an anchor as Peter grapples with guilt, responsibility, and what it truly means to be a hero. And throughout all of that, she's there for him, even if she doesn't really know what's going on. As Electro's actions escalate, becoming more dangerous and reckless, Peter has to confront the reality that good intentions don't justify hurting others, even if he once didn't disagree with Max's message. And the lesson hits home because a certain someone taught Peter about responsibility. Peter accepts that he has to stop him, and from here, we see Peter watch his former mentor lose himself to vengeance over the fact that despite all the problems going on in New York City with the Kingpin and his reign over organized crime, Spider-Man and the police are currently spending their time going after him, someone who is just trying to help. Now, I want the season climax to come during a massive blackout where Electro plans to overload the city's power grid, believing that only by destroying the current system can he build a better one. A tense scene occurs where Spider-Man has to save Gwen, and she feels a familiar connection without quite being able to put her finger on it. Peter then has to make the impossible choice of either stopping his former mentor or save the people who seem to represent everything wrong with the system that failed both of them. It's here that Peter finally becomes the Spider-Man we know, choosing to save everyone, even people he doesn't like or agree with, because that's what heroes do. That's what Spider-Man does. He helps people. I can write out a whole other season for this, but you know what this all really comes down to? Giving Peter Parker's story the space it deserves to breathe, to grow, to actually mean something to people watching it today. Because Spider-Man isn't just another superhero. He's the hero who reminds us that greatness isn't about having powers. It's about how you use them. He's the hero who shows us that doing the right thing often means sacrificing what you want for what others need. And in 2024, when people are facing challenges that would make even Spider-Man think twice, we need that message more than ever. This isn't just about making another Spider-Man adaptation. It's about finally telling Peter Parker's story the way it deserves to be told. Not rushing between action sequences, not compressed into 2 hours, but given room to explore every triumph, every failure, every quiet moment that makes Spider-Man not just a hero, but a symbol of hope for generations. Because at its core, Spider-Man has always been about one thing: a young person trying their best to do what's right in a world that doesn't make that easy. And maybe, just maybe, by telling his story this way, we can remind people why Spider-Man isn't just the friendly neighborhood hero who we want. He's the hero we need.